Now to an incredible find overseas, an elaborate series of stone monuments believed to have been hidden for thousands of years, not far from the famous site of Stonehenge.
When researchers pointed 3D laser scanners at every remaining stone at Stonehenge, they expected to confirm what archaeology had been saying for decades. Instead, the scans revealed something that should not be possible. The oldest stones are the most precisely crafted, and every generation of builders after them did worse work. For 900 years, the skill declines, the opposite of every civilization in recorded history. And that was only the first thing the scans found. Here is what else those 3D scans uncovered, the scan that changed everything. In 2011, English Heritage pointed a sub-millimeter 3D laser scanner at every visible face of every remaining stone at Stonehenge. The scanner fires pulses of light and measures how they bounce back, building a three-dimensional surface map accurate to half a millimeter, thinner than a human hair. The scan captures 700 surface features. Dozens of previously unknown axe head carvings appear on stones that archaeologists have been studying for over a century. Prehistoric markings and construction signatures, invisible to the naked eye, suddenly materialize in the data.
The name Stonehenge is thought to come from the Old English or Saxon word Stanhengen, which means stone hanging, because it kind of resembles what gallows looked like in the Middle Ages. You had two uprights with a crossbeam.
Susan Graney, senior properties historian at English Heritage, said the results were far more revealing about the architecture of Stonehenge than anyone expected. She was being diplomatic. When computational analysis chews through these scans, the algorithms flag at least 5 distinct working techniques in the sarsen stones. The first is standard Neolithic pecking and grinding with stone mauls. Fine, expected. But on the lintels and the tongue and groove joints that lock the horizontal stones onto the uprights, the data shows something else. Curved surfaces with less than 2 millimeters of deviation across spans of 2 meters. That is the kind of tolerance you would expect from a modern machine shop, not from people pounding rocks with other rocks. The curvature of those lintels is not random. Each one curves slightly because when you line them up end to end on top of the uprights, they form a perfect circle. Whoever carved these stones understood that a flat lintel on a circular structure creates visible gaps, so they pre-curved every single one. That requires geometry, planning, measurement systems. And it requires understanding the relationship between a circle's diameter and its circumference, a concept that would not be formally described for another 2,000 years. Here is something else the scans revealed: the joints. The uprights and lintels are not simply stacked. They are locked together using mortise and tenon joints, a technique we associate with woodworking, not megalithic construction. Each upright has a protruding knob on top. Each lintel has a corresponding socket on its underside. They slot together like furniture. The scan data measures these joints at tolerances that would challenge a modern stonemason with power tools. These people supposedly had antler picks. And get this, the stones facing. Northeast, the direction you approach from the avenue, had been completely pick-dressed. The builders stripped off the rough crust to expose a fine, bright gray-white surface. But the stones facing southwest left rough, untouched. They built a stage. You walk up the avenue on the summer solstice, the sun rising behind you, and the stones ahead glow white against the green plain. Theatrical architecture, 5,000 years ago. Now, layer in the geochemistry. Professor David Nash at the University of Brighton used portable X-ray fluorescence spectrometry to fingerprint all 52 remaining sarsens. His results, published in Science Advances, show that 50 share an identical chemical signature, all from one source, West Woods, about 15 miles north. The builders sourced chemically consistent stone from a single specific woodland. Quality control, standardization, a supply chain. Nash himself said it was really exciting to use 21st century science to understand the Neolithic past. But the implication goes beyond exciting. It suggests an organized society capable of geological assessment, material testing, and logistical planning on a scale we have never attributed to this period. But the scan data is about to get much stranger. Because when acoustic engineers got hold of it, they discovered Stonehenge was not just built to be seen, it was built to be heard. The sound machine. Professor Trevor Cox, an acoustical engineer at the University of Salford, did something no one had ever attempted. He built a 1/12 scale model of Stonehenge. His team 3D printed 27 representative stones from laser scan data provided by Historic England, poured silicone molds, then cast the remaining 130 stones out of a plaster polymer mix sealed with gray automotive spray paint to match real sarsens acoustic reflectivity. The result was a 2.6 meter wide replica of the monument as it stood around 2200 BCE with all 157 estimated stones in place. Cox nicknamed it Stonehenge Lego. He placed it inside Salford's semi-anechoic chamber, a room lined with foam wedges designed to absorb all sound, simulating the open Salisbury Plain. Then he blasted it with ultrasonic frequencies scaled up by a factor of 12, because when you shrink a space by 12, you need to multiply the frequency by 12 to keep the physics accurate. 7 days of testing. The results land in the Journal of Archaeological Science, despite having no roof, despite massive gaps between the stones. The interior of Stonehenge behaves acoustically like an enclosed room. Mid-frequency sounds linger for an average of 0.6 seconds of reverberation time, comparable to a small modern lecture hall. Human voices amplify by more than 4 decibels. Drums and bronze horns get boosted between 10 and 20%. Cox described it as quite magical, that you could feel what it would have sounded like in that space. But here is the catch. The sound stays inside. Step outside the circle, and you hear almost nothing. Now picture this. It is 2200 BCE. A clear night on Salisbury Plain. Hundreds of people have gathered from across Britain. They have walked for days to be here. They stand outside the stone circle in the dark. They can see firelight flickering between the megaliths. They can see shadows of figures moving inside, but they cannot hear a thing. Inside, a small group begins to chant. The sound bounces between the sarsens, amplifying, reverberating, filling the space with resonance that feels almost supernatural. The voices boom and echo as if the stones themselves are speaking. The people outside hear silence. The people inside hear thunder. That is not an accident. That is engineered exclusivity. A technology of power. The stones create a sonic barrier between those who are permitted to hear and those who are not. Trevor Cox noted that the acoustics being more like an enclosed room, despite no roof and lots of gaps, is remarkable. Timothy Darville of Bournemouth University confirmed sound was fairly well contained within the monument, and by implication, Stonehenge was fairly well insulated from sounds coming in. Now, here is where it gets wild. The bluestones. The smaller inner circle stones. When you strike certain dolerite bluestones, they ring, like a bell, a clear metallic tone that sustains and resonates. A 2013 study from the Royal College of Art confirmed they could be played like a giant xylophone. The researchers called it prehistoric rock music. And those musical properties were even more pronounced in antiquity, before modern conservation set some of them in reinforced concrete, dampening their natural reverberations. These stones came from the Preseli Hills in Wales, over 150 miles away. Chemical analysis shows the builders did not grab them from one convenient quarry. They selected specific stones from multiple outcrops scattered across the hills. They went shopping across an entire mountain range for rocks that sing. Then they carried those singing rocks and arranged them inside an acoustic amplification chamber made of 25-ton sarsens. If your brain just short-circuited a little, hit subscribe, because what comes next is even harder to explain. The celestial machine. Everybody knows about the solstice alignment. Sun rises over the heel stone on June 21st. That alignment is the appetizer. The main course is the moon. In 2024, a team from English Heritage, Oxford, Leicester, and Bournemouth universities, and the Royal Astronomical Society launches a research project to investigate the 18.6-year lunar cycle called the Major Lunar Standstill. The moon's extreme rising and setting points along the horizon expand and contract over nearly 2 decades. You need to observe continuously for almost an entire generation to map this pattern. Miss a standstill event, and you wait another 18.6 years. Professor Clive Ruggles, Emeritus Professor of Archaeoastronomy at the University of Leicester, confirms that Stonehenge's forestation stones align with the moon's extreme positions during a major standstill. He told The Guardian that people likely noticed the moon rising unusually far to the north or south, realized this was something special, and came to venerate and eventually monumentalize the directions concerned. You can imagine the elders recalling a time when they saw the moon in a sacred direction, and then a generation later, people's awe at starting to see this again. Think about what that means. The elders watch the moon for decades. They pass observations to the next generation. The grandchildren finally see the standstill event their grandparents described, and they decide to lock that celestial rhythms into permanent stone. But here is the detail that stops researchers cold. Stonehenge sits at latitude 51 degrees north. At this latitude, and only at this approximate latitude, the lunar and solar alignments occur at right angles to one another. Shift the monument 50 kilometers north or south, and the geometry breaks. The builders chose the one spot in Britain where the sun and moon alignments lock together at 90 degrees. Then they built there, not 10 miles to the north, not 20 miles to the south, right there. On the precise spot where the math works. Jennifer Wexler of English Heritage noted that ancient people would have been so much more aware of the sky than we are now. But awareness is one thing. Calculating the intersection point of two independent celestial cycles across geographic coordinates is something else entirely. Dr. Amanda Chadburn of the University of Oxford points to another detail. Archaeologists found cremated human remains clustered in the southeast section. That direction corresponds to the southernmost moonrise during a major standstill. These burials were made centuries before the sarsen stones went up. The lunar connection predates the iconic stone circle itself. They tracked the moon across an 18.6-year cycle. They identified the one latitude where solar and lunar geometry converge. They buried their dead in alignment with the moon's extreme positions, and they encoded all of it into stone that has survived for 5,000 years. Knowledge that was supposedly lost until modern astronomy rediscovered it. And they did all of this before inventing the wheel, before developing writing, before smelting metal. Somehow, on a windswept plain in southern England, they tracked the most complex astronomical cycle visible from Earth, and built a monument that still aligns with it 5,000 years later. But if what they built above ground is staggering, what lies beneath it defies comprehension. What lies beneath? The Stonehenge Hidden Landscapes Project, led by Professor Vince Gaffney of the University of Bradford with the Ludwig Boltzmann Institute in Austria, spends 4 years conducting the largest geophysical mapping survey ever attempted on a single archaeological site. 12 square kilometers mapped around Stonehenge, detecting features buried up to 3 meters deep, terabytes of data, and the scope of what they find redefines the site entirely. Gaffney described the landscape as terra incognita despite centuries of study. The presumption had always been that there was nothing there. The data obliterates that presumption. 15 previously unknown Neolithic monuments emerge, henges, barrows, timber structures, all invisible from the surface. One long barrow reveals a massive timber building used for ritual preparation of the dead, sitting 3 meters underground while tourists walk directly over it. At Durrington Walls, the massive Superhenge, less than 3 kilometers away, radar reveals a row of up to 90 standing stones, some 4.5 meters tall, buried beneath the earthen bank, pushed over, deliberately buried, hidden for millennia. Nobody in 400 years of study had any idea they were there. Professor Gaffney says this discovery changes fundamentally how we understand Stonehenge. Paul Garwood of the University of Birmingham goes further. Everything written previously about the Stonehenge landscape will need to be rewritten. But the most disturbing finding is a circle of massive pits surrounding Durrington Walls. Each pit more than 10 meters across and 5 meters deep, 40 feet wide, 16 feet deep, dug by hand with antler picks into solid chalk. They form a ring over 2 kilometers in diameter, enclosing more than 3 square kilometers, the largest prehistoric structures ever found in Great Britain, and nobody knew they were there. Gaffney explains that the people who dug these pits were counting, measuring out their cosmology into the landscape, then digging immense pits at precise distances to record that belief system permanently into the earth. 2 more pits at opposite ends of the cursus form a triangle with Stonehenge. On the summer solstice, one aligns with the sunrise. the other with the sunset. Stonehenge was never a standalone monument. It was the nucleus of a designed landscape stretching for miles. The earth moving alone would have required thousands of people working for decades before they touched a single sarsen. Why invest that kind of labor unless the exact position was absolutely non-negotiable, unless they were following a plan? The impossible paradox. Now, we circle back to the discovery that haunts this entire investigation. When researchers map the progression of work across construction phases using tool marks and weathering patterns, they find something that contradicts every model of how civilizations develop. The earliest work is the best. The first sarsen circle and trilithons, erected around 2500 BCE, show the highest precision, the tightest joints, the most sophisticated shaping, the most accurate alignments. These are the stones with the acoustic engineering and the pre-curved. Lintels. Later additions decline. The shaping gets rougher, the joints get looser, the alignments drift. By the final phase around 1600 BCE, 900 years after the original construction, the work is markedly inferior. Every other civilization in history shows the opposite trajectory. The Egyptians start with step pyramids and end with Giza. The Greeks refine the Doric order into the Corinthian. Skills accumulate, knowledge compounds. At Stonehenge, knowledge erodes. It looks like maintenance, like people preserving something they inherited but did not fully understand. Tightening bolts on a machine whose blueprints were lost. Repainting a masterpiece with house paint. Running software you cannot debug because the original programmer is gone. Each generation doing their best with a tradition they can perform but no longer explain. The 3D scans make this undeniable. The tool marks tell the story. The earliest stones show controlled, systematic shaping with consistent technique across large surfaces. The later stones show hesitation, inconsistency, approaches that work in some areas but fail in others, as if the builders were imitating a process rather than executing one they understood. Mike Parker, Pearson of UCL, argues the declining quality might reflect changing priorities rather than vanishing expertise. Fair point, and it is important to take seriously. But it does not explain the acoustic engineering, the lunar cycle tracking, the singing stones selected from multiple outcrops 150 miles away, or the mortise and tenon joints with tolerances that tighten rather than loosen as you go backward in time. And Stonehenge is not alone. Newgrange in Ireland channels a beam of light into its inner chamber at dawn on the winter solstice, a feat of precision that still works perfectly after 5,000 years. Carnac in France arranges over 3,000 stones in complex geometric patterns stretching for miles. The Maltese temples predate Stonehenge and show striking mathematical precision. Across Europe, the earliest megalithic work is consistently the most sophisticated, as if all of these sites draw from the same well of knowledge, a well that was slowly running dry. The question that haunts researchers is not whether these builders were capable. The scans prove they were. The question is where that capability came from and where it went. The question with no comfortable answer. So, what was Stonehenge actually for? The acoustic engineering turns it into a sonic chamber where the people in power control not just what you see but what you hear. The astronomical alignments turn it into a calculating device tracking celestial events across human lifetimes. An analog computer made of stone. The bluestones turned it into an instrument built from hand-selected singing rocks. The buried landscape turns it into the centerpiece of a cosmological map drawn directly onto the Earth. And the declining precision turns all of it into a warning that whatever culture built the original phase possessed knowledge their descendants could not replicate. That the monument was not the beginning of something, it was an attempt to preserve the end of something, to encode what was being lost into a material that does not decay, does not burn, does not wash away. Stone. Only 5% of the site has been excavated. 95% remains buried. Radar shows chambers, passages, and structures that no one has opened. What is down there? Carved symbols? Tools that rewrite the timeline? Remains that tell us who these builders actually were? Every year the scanning technology improves. Every pass finds something new. And every discovery makes the original achievement look more impossible, not less. This is not fringe speculation. This is real stone, real measurements published in Science Advances and the Journal of Archaeological Science. Real acoustic data tested in a university laboratory over 7 days. Real alignments confirmed by the Royal Astronomical Society during a once-in-a-generation lunar event. Real buried monuments detected by the largest geophysical survey ever conducted at a single archaeological site. Named researchers from Brighton, Salford, Leicester, Oxford, Bournemouth, Bradford, and UCL. All on the record, all peer-reviewed. 5,000 years ago, someone built a sound machine that traps voices inside walls of stone. They tuned it to the moon. They chose the one latitude on Earth where the sun and moon lock together at right angles. They selected singing rocks from 150 miles away and arranged them inside the chamber. They carved pre-curved lintels that form a perfect circle when assembled. They locked everything together with mortise and tenon joints at tolerances that would impress a modern engineer. And they did it all so precisely that every generation after them could only do it worse. Then they vanished and left the stones standing, silent, waiting for someone with the right technology to finally hear what they were trying to say. If that just rewired something in your brain, you are in the right place. Subscribe because the next deep dive goes somewhere even darker. See you in the next one.